going through this thing?
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
gonna
he's
say
about
no.
to announce right now, hun.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
No.
I don't know if the community members have finished reading it or what.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, folks, we're going to begin the meeting. I'm Philip J. Wolf, and I'm the chair of the Executive Committee for COAB. This is our second work session that we're having here tonight. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have food available on the side here. Obviously, we have 2 exit doors in the back and restrooms. I'm not actually sure, Mandy, where are the restrooms? Down this hallway? Back there? Great. Great. Thank you, Mandy. We have an agenda. It's fairly succinct, but things might come up that we might need to make a little modifications for and add some things as we go along. Tom Steenson has typed a draft for our report that we will be giving before Judge Simon on October 25th. He drafted this report. The COAB members have reviewed it. And really first, I guess, to begin, one idea that was put out from last meeting was that I would start the introduction to the report, turn it over to Tom to continue the presentation to the judge, and that was the original plan. After the meeting, we learned from Judy, one of the attorneys, that only one person is permitted to give the report to the judge. So I met with Tom on Friday, and him and I tried to have some discussion. Tom strongly feels that he should be the person to do the report because he actually did most of the work drafting it, and he is very confident and he is articulate. He can really lay it on them. So I feel also strongly that I can do it as well. I think that I will be using American Sign Language. I think that that leaves an impact. And so Tom and I kind of have the same views that we both feel. And I, as chair, I don't want to make the decision. I want it to come from the community. I don't want it to be solely my decision. So I sent an email to COAB members asking. Rochelle replied, and she said that she feels that Tom should give the report. The rest of the members, I haven't heard anything thus far. I've sent some things out. So tonight is our opportunity to figure out what we want to see for that. Tom, do you have any comments you want to say regarding that?
I'm not sure.
Can
I'm not-
Can I just interrupt? I'm sorry, Tom.
Just want to say, I'm not sure that was exactly my position about why I should give the report, but anyway.
So, Philip, I don't know if you received my email yet.
Which email? Which one? Oh, yes, you wanted to add. That's what you emailed about the addition.
No, I was talking
Give
about.
me a little more. What were you?
So I was in support of Tom. If we have to make that either or choice, which I do not. Did you get that email? No.
I don't think I did.
So
I might. I've been getting a lot of emails. I'm
I
not sure
hear
I
ya.
specifically got
Yeah.
yours, but I did get Rochelle's. So
So I wrote an email and I said,
that's fine.
if we're choiced, or if we're forced to make, if it's a forced choice, then I think because of the position that the COAB has been put in by all the various stakeholders, actors, that it would bode well if we were to have somebody who is experienced and, you know, like, I'm sorry, Tom, but like, you know, the court is Tom's sandbox, and he's been doing it for 35 years. And I'm concerned, I really want to see the community continue to have a voice. Of course, I would love it if you were to be there and if you were a lawyer, right? Of course, I would say, like, yeah, Philip, totally. But because of the position that we're in, and it's a legal matter, and we have to take the community into account, I have a vote of confidence for Tom to take care of that.
Thank you. Catherine, do you have any comments on that?
No, I don't. I'm sorry.
The only other information I have is that Jimmy just texted, and he was planning on coming, but he's not going to make it. He said he was going to call me tomorrow. It's his position that the COAB should present the report to the judge as a team. And I actually think I spoke to Jimmy about that issue a few weeks ago, and the judge isn't going to allow that to happen. So I mean, I appreciate Jimmy's position, but that's just not going to happen. So.
I mean, I don't know a lot about the legal system or courts or anything like that, but
Okay. Well, I think what we can do in that case is we can go ahead with Tom giving the presentation. I still will be there in the audience, and, you know, if the judge allows it or permits it for some reason, I will be there. But I say we give it to Tom. Congratulations, Tom. And I'm really looking forward to you doing this. And I appreciate that you're representing us. It's a very important role, and I'm glad you'll be doing the report. And I want to talk a little bit more about the report specifically. Roger David Hardesty, he wrote an email just last minute. I received this email, and I forwarded it on to the COAB members. I don't know if you received it or have had a chance to review it, but we have copies of it here. Did you read, Tom? Did any of you, Rochelle, did you have a chance to review it?
I haven't had any time to look at it.
Okay. Maybe we can give you just a few minutes to just browse over it and skim it. Really, the gist of his email is that he would like to add in the report, if possible, to consider some things that he would like to add to the report. Some expansion on a few points, some specific points he wants to include. I read it, and I thought I would bring it to the meeting to share with all of us, so it's definitely open for discussion.
well, I'm going to need time to read it.
Yes, let's just be aware that, you know, October 25th is soon approaching, and I know that we all need time to review these, but if somebody already did read it and would like to speak on it, we can go ahead with that. But if nobody has any comments at this time, that's fine, and we can discuss it further through email. Yeah, Rochelle, did you?
I did read it, and if the COAB were not in recess, I think this is an issue that we could take up and make a decision about whether we feel we want to write a letter to Judge Simon or anybody else about the police contract. But this isn't a matter that's contained in our work over the last year, and does not seem to me to be part of our report. It's certainly possible that we can make reference to, and I think we did, make reference to other groups having positions about various things, about the COAB, about the COCL. Maybe we could even put in the words the contract, but the details of the voting by the council, I don't believe belongs in our report. Thank you.
Rochelle, thank you for your input. I do want to make sure I understand your position. So you're suggesting that perhaps we would have the report and then have something not in the report, but almost as a last page as a reference? Is that what you mean? Not in the report, but?
If we were able to do business, perhaps, but we're not able to do business.
So you're saying we can't make a decision on it, right? Because
I
it's not
see.
an official COAB meeting?
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. Talk about pop music, constrained.
Thank you. Thanks, Rochelle. Anyone before we move on from this point?
I won't claim to have digested it, and I would probably have to have a conversation with Roger to better understand what he's trying to say. I don't see what he's saying easily fitting into the report of what we've done for the last year and a half. I mean, clearly the contract, in my opinion, and probably others, is a big issue. It's water under the bridge in a sense, unfortunately. And the ACLU may well have a lawsuit in mind, is what he suggests. And that would be fine, but I think if we're going to take action, we need to do it officially, and we can't do that because we're in recess. Related to that, I am going to propose that we schedule an official full COAB meeting 2 weeks from tonight, because in theory, the 60-day recess is supposed to expire on October 18th.
Is there any seconds?
Well,
Any second on that?
can we vote on stuff during a work session?
Well, I just think we should put the wheels in motion.
Yeah,
I
I
guess,
mean, I
okay,
totally agree.
unofficially, does
Oh,
somebody?
yeah, definitely, yeah.
I
Yeah.
Okay,
second.
okay.
Yeah, okay,
Then we'll get that worked out for a meeting in 2 weeks.
good.
Is that the 27th?
Did you guys, community?
Yes.
You can come, make sure it's on your calendars.
Well,
Let's see. 27th,
Let me-
I believe.
let me suggest that there's a very good chance that the recess, at least in my opinion, will get continued, because the problems that the DOJ and the city claim are the reasons that they put us in recess haven't been addressed. You know, we don't have any more members. You know, we're still going to barely make a quorum if all 8 people show up. So I think they're probably going to extend the recess, but I think we should go ahead and try to set the meeting and see what happens.
It'd be nice.
Yeah, and I would say that it won't hurt just to get that on the books, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't, we can postpone it, but, you know, just because we might be in recess, I don't want to miss an opportunity if we could potentially have a meeting. So I say we could set it and see what happens.
I don't know if you saw this already, but
Mike?
not my name. I don't know if you saw it already, but the COCL announced a town hall meeting on the Tuesday of that week, right after the judge's hearing. So, okay, just want to make sure you were aware there's already another meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, that is true.
It's at 6 o'clock at night. I don't know how long the hearing will last. The hearing starts at 1 o'clock.
It starts at 1, yes, and it's supposed to go, and the Coco Town Hall is at night at 6 that same day, so yes. Yeah.
Portland Building?
I believe the last status conference went until 5, and I think they kicked us out.
It's the Fed.
I'd like to make it clear that it's the COCO's town hall. It is not the COCO and COAB's town hall.
Yes, that is correct, yep, and thank you for that clarification. I appreciate what Rochelle pointed out, that Coco is also not clear on the advertisement. They advertised it as Coco Coab Town Hall, and we suggested that they have their own letterhead, that they make it clear that it is their own town hall and that Coab is not involved. So thank you for bringing up that piece of clarification.
So should we stop doing this kind of thing too,
Yes.
Philip?
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Okay.
But again, and that's up to us, and I mean, I can't make sole decisions.
Anyway, I don't mean to waste time.
Yes, but, and we can work out those details, but that's just something to keep in mind. Is there anything else that we want to discuss related to the report before we go into Coco's draft of the report? Yes.
What happened at the last meeting was that Bud read verbatim the report. And the fact that this was a collaborative report in the writing, I think makes it a few steps higher than last year's report.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that feedback.
Let me say a few words about the draft. because I write and I have time, I did a lot of the writing, but I got significant contributions from 2 or 3 COAB people. I've also received some feedback from Dan Handelman. His keen eye for detail caught a half a dozen fact fixes or fact checks, which were all right on, and I've made those changes. They're not substantive. I'm not particularly interested in going through them. They changed some numbers and some dates, those kinds of things. I've also heard, although Maria is not here tonight, from Maria, and she wants to endorse or sign off on the report, as does Catherine, who contacted me today, but she's here anyway. I'm assuming Jimmy will, but I haven't really had that conversation with him. So I think it will be at least 7 of the 8 of us. I'm not sure about Laquita. I've emailed her and asked for some input and a response, and I haven't heard back from her. So that's kind of where we're at. Of course, yeah.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Before, but my big question is, what does partial compliance even mean? Because the only thing I can think of is like back in high school math where you didn't get the answer right, but you showed your work, so you got some credit. But I mean, I guess I don't understand, like, you know, because if your boss gives you an assignment, usually it's either done or not done. You don't get like half credit. Yeah, so I don't even understand how, like, I guess how that metric works.
Katie, I think that in the beginning of their reports, they have definitions, so you might want to check.
Well, both the DOJ and the COCO, and I'm not sure which came first. Actually, it might have been generated by the PPB before they even started writing reports, but somebody in that group started using these, I think it's 4 tiers of compliance ratings. So that's what that's about. And it's defined in those reports.
I can read what it says. They say partial compliance.
Please.
It's on page 2 of their newest draft. The city/PPB has made significant progress towards the satisfaction of the provisions requirements, though additional work is needed. So that even makes it worse because they're saying significant progress.
I think the significant in mathematics is 70% or more. But I'm not sure. But I've only taken calculus.
Okay.
Just as an overview of the report, we tried to do 2 things. We thought it was important to describe and lay out the efforts that we've made and what we've tried to accomplish and what's pending, at least actively pending. And so the first section, so to speak, I think pretty fairly does that. And then the second section addresses problems, you know, the obstacles we've faced, and some actions we've taken fairly recently to try to deal with that, as well as then not an exhaustive list, but a 12 or 13 point list of substantial changes that we think need to be made in order for us to function and have a chance of being successful. Some would require changes to the settlement agreement, which requires either the consent of the parties, the DOJ and the city, and then it's given to the judge, and the judge would probably just sign off on it. If there's disagreement between the DOJ and the city as to something that one or the other wants changed in the settlement agreement, if they can't mediate it, then it gets decided by the judge, which is why I think, since the judge has to get involved, we're likely to stay in recess. And I think it could be months, frankly, because it will take that long for them to sort out these things if they have some disputes. Now, maybe they're ahead of the game, but they haven't announced anything. And they were supposed to take until roughly the end of October, October 25th, I think, thereabouts, for the city to make proposals to the DOJ. So they're not even sitting down and assuming there's going to be a negotiating yet. So that's, yeah.
See, but this is why we need,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just had a question, a legal question, I guess. Why are we required to give feedback to COCO when COAB is on recess?
Well, in fact, under the settlement agreement for the COCO's report that they've now come out with, we're supposed to have 30 days to look at it. And you're right, Philip, since we're in recess, we don't have any, the clock isn't running. And then the way the COCO's setting things up, they're going to be done listening to people, including the COAB, by the end of the month.
Oh, the 31st.
So we're effectively, not going to get any input.
But we aren't at this point required. They're asking
Yeah.
us as individuals to come to the town hall and give them feedback, but they understand that we're in recess and we can't, as a group, give them feedback.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That is clear. And that's good, so the community has an idea. I saw one hand in the back, yeah.
Yeah, there's been actions, very serious actions, from City Council, and I assume the police commissioner is under the accountability of this committee and the effort to change the culture and the serious issues that were raised on the settlement agreement. So the police commissioner actually has violated and has removed a chief of police based on a meeting that he held in private illegally, and there's no accountability. Also, the recent council meetings have not allowed people to even enter the building, which is unconstitutional, on critical issues related to accountability of the police, which led to, yesterday, almost a massacre of the people that were standing outside and were thrown down the steps, the back steps. Now, how much of this can be included at this late date in very serious issues that we're not making progress on accountability on any level within the police operations? And I'm very concerned about that.
Thank you very much for your comment. And I hear your concern. Should we open it up for discussion?
Well, to me, I think yesterday's,
I mean, I
from
have
the
something to say.
videos, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, V. Go ahead.
From the videos that I saw yesterday, I guess I would just agree with what Chief Marshman said about the internal legitimacy of the organization and the fact that the PPB is in a crisis moment as an organization.
Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I question whether COCO had the right to unilaterally sever from the COAB and/or to put the COAB in hiatus, because the COAB is written into the settlement agreement, and the settlement agreement moved forward because the COAB was to be independent and was to keep the judge informed. I think anybody that severs you is in noncompliance with the settlement agreement. And that's why I would recommend that you not sever your name, COCO COAB, just because if you were going to get a divorce, you'd have to do it legally, not illegally. So I think it's imperative that you consult what you consider to be the integrity of your own hearts and include that which is of concern to you, especially if there is something happening that shocks the conscience of the COAB, and bring it to the attention of the judge.
My personal feelings on this is that the city is in contempt of court for all of the things that they have done. Mike Schumann. And what they did is they put you on hiatus. They had a hiatus. They had a secret meeting with the police and negotiated a contract. They rammed it through the council. They are reforming the IPR in some strange way that nobody knows. And none of those should be what they're supposed to be doing. The police contract is the biggest thing that's happening because it had a chance to change the culture of the police department and get rid of bad officers when they do things. And they've now dumped that for 3 years. Now, why you can't say that and why you can't talk about that, they're going to dump you after this meeting, as far as I can tell. This is probably the last meeting the COAB's ever going to have. But so why can't you just go and tell them they're in contempt and you want them to be stopped? I don't understand the rest of this.
Thank you. I actually have something to say myself. I was there yesterday in person at City Hall, and I was a part of a pretty scary experience, as you all have seen. There was no interpreter. This is the 5th time this has happened. The captions were intermittent. They were cut off, which means that I didn't have full access to what was said and what was going on, being there, a deaf individual. Thirdly, if a community member wanted to speak out about their concerns, they were instantly silenced because it was not related to what was being discussed or on the agenda. So I was ignored as a community member. Luckily, I was able to leave before all the stuff happened. But I go to all of the meetings. I go to all of the, as you've seen, maybe it was about an hour or 2 hours, before to the meetings. But it was only 20 minutes this time before they rushed in and put things to an end. So that means that it was obviously already planned, that they were anticipating that something was going to happen. The police were already there. They called the SWAT team. And like I said, I had no idea what was going on. I was terrified. I ended up kind of retreating and just waiting on the sidelines to see when I could leave. I noticed many SWAT members were holding onto their weapons instead of having their hands up on their vest inside the City Hall building. They were already ready. And that is a big concern to me. That shows me that they were not interested in working with the community, in trying to de-escalate. That means they were ready for something else. And so, again, the contract is contrary to police accountability, and that isn't matching what we have been trying to go for. So it's a real problem. It's a serious problem. And so I think even if it's unrelated to the report, it should still be, I don't think it would hurt. We should bring it up anyways. Absolutely. I think it's important that they know what's going on. And so that's what I have to say about it.
Hi, I'm Linda Sin. Yesterday I was at City Hall with Philip and a few other people. I went to speak on the houseless crisis in our nation right now, working on a campaign with Right to Survive and Right to Dream Too. I have my ticket to sign in to speak for what I was going to testify for. Still haven't got my chance to testify. Instead
Well, they take your ticket now? Is this a new protocol?
I don't know. When we came in at Chambers, they had everything laid out, and then they had us sign it, and then they gave us, I don't know, what are these?
Like a citizen raffle ticket?
I don't know, did I win a bike or I won maced in my face is what I won. Part of yesterday's theatrical behavior from our lovely police force, what they did was they just I was already outside, and so I was watching from the outside in. So they had 6 rows of uniformed officers forcibly pushing people backwards down the stairs.
Was that on the 5th Avenue side?
Backwards down the stairs. They didn't care. People were falling over.
Down the stairs?
Down the stairs.
Like in the little foyer
Yes.
kind of place?
Shoving them. They were just as hard as they could.
Were they giving them more verbal indications?
They were just kept pushing forward. They weren't even giving people time to turn themselves around and walk out. They were just shoving.
Yeah, it was like
out
a
the door.
stampede.
Yeah. I seen actual bodies flying out the door, like right past me. I couldn't believe it. It was so intense. And then there was somebody laying on the ground that I watched an officer mule kick
What's
in the
mule
head.
kick?
So he took his foot backwards and kicked as hard as he could, or at least it appeared hard, in his head. So I was trying to hold the door open for other people to get out and try to, point out to the other officers, hey, this guy's knocked out cold and he's being trampled. And they didn't care. They didn't care. They weren't going to stop. They weren't going to stop. They didn't care who. There was no accountability even in that moment. There was and there were sergeants there. There were superior officers there that let that go down.
Yeah, and if I could add, I just want to emphasize it was shocking that they didn't allow ambulances to come to the front where all the action was happening. They had to go 2 blocks away. They had to carry these victims 2 blocks away. They wouldn't allow the ambulances to drive right up next to the action. So I mean, it's a big concern for sure.
So the ambulance had to carry people or take care of people 2 blocks away?
Yep, they did. Yes.
So the ambulance came down to on the Fifth Avenue side of City Hall, and then this is a clarifying question, and then
Yeah, they said you can't be here. You have to drive 2 blocks down. So the ambulance had to leave, go 2 blocks down.
One individual that had been knocked out cold and maced while they were knocked out cold had to have people escort them down there.
So the ambulance people didn't come to the victims. The victims
Had to go to the ambulance.
Let me just ask the question. So the victims, so that way I'm got it straight in my head. So the victims had to be carried by other people that weren't ambulance employees, some citizen or some Portlander who was there at the time, carry them 2 blocks to the ambulance to be taken care of.
Yes, you're correct.
Yes.
That probably
Yes.
was true for only part of the
It's hard to
time,
imagine.
because I was down there
That's what
yesterday
happened.
also.
And I did
And-
receive treatment right there in between the
Right,
city
and
hall.
there were some ambulances. I don't recall the name of the street that's on the south side of City Hall, but there was an ambulance right there, at least while I was.
Morrison?
For a short amount of time. Then they were asked to move, and they were is instructed by police officers not to go up there, otherwise they would be considered cohorts as well and would be maced as well or brutalized as well.
So you're given a verbal warning.
Yes, go ahead.
I specifically asked one of our police advisors whether, when mace is ordered, medical is on standby alert to immediately render first aid, and I was told yes.
One of the COAB member, PPB member,
Hughes, Sergeant Hughes.
Shell Hughes.
She assured me that people would not be permitted to suffer from the spraying of capsicum spray,
Yeah.
because
Maybe in her division.
people have died from this.
Yeah, they have.
Yes, go ahead, Dan.
Hi, Dan Handelman again, Portland Cop Watch. So I see the elimination of the 48-hour rule is actually mentioned in the future tense on page 8 of your report. And I hate to say that it's in the past tense because it was a non-emergency ordinance that passed yesterday. So there's 30 days until it actually kicks in. And we're hoping to do a legal challenge and we're working with Don't Shoot Portland to find a way to legally challenge that adoption. But for the time being, one could say that they did promise to eliminate the 48-hour rule, not just that they're considering it. And the rest of that sentence says, although it's doing so without addressing much broader reforms, we will be recommending to the
What
cities.
paragraph, Dan? Page
The
8?
top paragraph at the top of page 8. The police accountability system. So you could add something in there that says, we're, if you can get a consensus among the people who are here, we're shocked at the police behavior that was displayed during the city hall. Are you not seeing it? It's at the top of page 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it says they're considering the elimination of the 48-hour rule. So I'm just suggesting that maybe you can say the city has promised to eliminate the 48-hour rule, and then say, we're dismayed at the way that the city handled the discussion of the contract and the way the police handled the protest that was happening, the subsequent the concurrent and subsequent protest, or something like that. It would be a very short. That way you can at least bring it to the judge's attention.
So it's,
I think it's fine.
Thank you, Dan.
To put that in, but I need to say that between now and the 25th, a lot of things can happen too, and there needs to be an end time for the writing of this report, unless Tom wants to stay up on the night of the 24th, writing everything that's happening.
Sure, just send it in.
what a good sport.
And I will bring coffee to you, Tom. I will stay up with you. I'll give you a back rub, whatever you need to keep awake.
I would just like to add that our mayor was very aware of what was going on. As I looked up on the side of the building, he was looking out the window while people were seeking treatment.
Yep, I saw him too. He was watching
Yes.
what was going on.
I
I was
waved
like,
at him.
hello,
He waved
hello.
back. Yes. Watching.
Couldn't believe it. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. All right.
I think I tend to agree with Rochelle on adding language at this point that addresses the melee yesterday. I am interested in including something about the way the contract negotiations were handled and that sort of thing, because that does directly relate
Yes.
to
Yes.
accountability recommendations that we're not getting passed because we're in recess, and sort of it kind
Exactly.
of dovetails.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as some people have said, it's the elephant in the room to some degree. What
Absolutely.
the police union gets away with. So
Absolutely.
I'll work on
And it doesn't matter how you word it,
work on
you know.
something regarding
as we
that.
add
It's
something
going to be
there.
short, but at least it'll get reported that we think there's a link there, and it's because that contract does nothing about accountability.
Yes.
Nothing. And we weren't consulted, obviously.
Amanda Fritz, I think her actual words were, we are buying the 48-hour rule.
I haven't watched the city council proceedings.
Her representative just walked in. You
Oh,
can
there's
ask her.
Christina here. Yeah. Christina, do you know if Amanda said that? I'm sorry to catch you on the fly there. How's your day going, Christina? Good.
Thank you. What was the question?
Do you mind?
The statement that Amanda made yesterday when she was reading, she included the phrase, we are buying the 48-hour rule.
I don't exactly know word for word what she said. I do know that the 48-hour rule was one of the biggest reasons why she did vote yes. But I'm not sure about the exact diction that she used.
Okay. Yes.
For a long time, quite a few years, the 48-hour rule was just a courtesy that IA conferred. And I think it's just going to go back to another courtesy. One of the detectives said, and I can't remember which one, said that we only speak to the police officers when we are ready to speak to them, which usually is not within the first 48 hours.
But of course, if you're a civilian suspect, they're ready to speak with you right away.
Okay, just checking time. It's 6:20. We're here until 7:30 this evening. If there's any more comment, please, we'll give you a 10-minute break, and then, are there any more comments? Any more burning? Yes, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say, along with what Linda was saying about yesterday, one of the most disturbing things I saw was when they were trying to shut the front doors, a police officer whose name tag was uncovered, and that's a whole nother violation, basically shoved a guy, like he landed on his back, completely shoved him, like to get him out of the building. And
Was that Jesse Sponsor?
Yes, and not one
I saw
police
that on
officer
video.
even like checked to see if he was okay, if he needed attention, like even went out, they just locked the doors and did that. And I couldn't believe that. Like, I mean, just as another human being to be able to have that lack of concern for somebody.
What I didn't understand was, I was, obviously I wasn't there, so I had no context, and I don't know how much we really want to talk about this, but it didn't make sense to me in terms of proportion, how violently Jesse Sponberg was just tossed. I think even down some stairs, and
4 of them. Yeah.
four.
He was hurt. I saw the fall.
And
it was
and you saw
terrible.
You saw it, yeah. I didn't understand why there was such a sense of disproportionality. It just didn't make any sense.
And just that they wouldn't even bother to have anybody check on him and see, because something like that can really hurt a person, like, physically.
I don't think that's in their policies.
It almost felt like they were targeting cop watchers. It almost felt like they were targeting individuals that were saying things about how the police are behaving and accountability. It's like they targeted, because quite a few people that do cop watch were victimized yesterday.
It's a possibility. We don't know if they're who they're targeting. It doesn't matter. They shouldn't be able to behave like that, period.
So, since you have a few minutes, what I sent to Tom were, as he said, were very minor little correction points, like on page 5, where it's talking about the letter that the DOJ wrote explaining how your recommendations were used to create the new mental health crisis directive. The year that you received that was 2016, not 2015. But that paragraph says that letter is attached, and I don't see it here tonight, and it wasn't on the package on the website. I don't know if I've ever seen that letter, and I don't know what the DOJ explained. And it's, since you've only heard back on that one recommendation, I think it'd be great for us to have be able to see that. And
Dan, I just want to be clear. Is that so you're saying it's June 11th, 2016?
No, it was July 1st, 2016 when you heard back in the right column, in the response column.
Oh, but it's July what? July 1st? You want to see the letter? Got it. Okay.
I'll get it posted. I apologize. I missed that attachment. I can tell you that the letter does purport to, and I think it does, discuss the COAB recommendations related to that directive. And I think it's a little bit conclusory about taking them into account, and I didn't actually compare the recommendations with what the directive is supposed to now read as, but it seemed to, in part, pick up on the recommendations.
Right, and that might be worth taking some time for that in case the judge asks you questions. Then you can sort of say, well, yeah, they did take in something into consideration, but they threw out most of what we said, or they used it. I don't know. I haven't looked at it either. So on that note, if again, I know you're trying to go through this quickly for the judge, but if there's a couple of words, maybe every couple of recommendation, you could throw in a little bit more detail about what one of the recommendations was, because in that one, not in that one. In the next one after that, you describe how you specifically asked to get rid of the 48-hour rule. It's helpful to have like a specific example. And it doesn't have to be for everyone, but just a couple of little examples.
Time is a consideration.
Right, I
We're supposed
understand.
to only have 15 minutes, is what I've been told.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow, that's too bad. That's terrible.
15 minutes for a 20-page document.
I can pretty much do it.
Okay.
Okay,
then
well
also-
now I'm really happy you're going to be doing the reporting then.
So I also noted that on page, and this is something else Tom fixed, on page 8, where it lists that there were 46 accountability recommendations. Oh, no.
It's actually 48.
It's actually 48. And when I wrote back and forth with him this afternoon, when I found that, there's actually, you made, as a group, you made 52 recommendations, but I gathered that 4 weren't about accountability per se.
4 were procedural or related to how we operate. Yeah.
Did the city respond to those in any way? So we know how their track record is? Is it 1 out of 52, or is it maybe 5 out of 52? We don't know.
The city's never responded to us
Okay.
about anything.
Okay.
I mean, indirectly, the 48-hour rule is a response, but
Just for the record. Okay, I can't remember what the other ones were at this point, but it was they were just mostly minor things, and I think overall this is a very good document. Looking forward to the presentation, and I do hope that the judge takes some time to ask some questions to you. We'll invite other members of the board up also to speak, because you are the conduit. I mean, obviously, I'm on the steering committee of the AMA Coalition, and we have somebody who gets to speak to the judge also, but you're the conduit for the general broad community to speak to the judge, and I hope that he'll take the time to ask you questions.
So have you gotten the AMAC Coalition to support the monitor yet?
We can talk about that afterwards.
Well, let's talk about it now.
Well, the request that the AMA Coalition had for the community's edification, the request that the AMA Coalition had for why they didn't want to support the monitor is that they wanted to know how it would work to have a court-appointed monitor that has an advisory board like you all, because there's no precedent for that. So we were waiting for a response, a clear written plan of what that would look like in order to sign off on it. And that's basically, I think Portland Cop Watch, we also had the same kind of concerns, like how are we going to make it work with a community board and a court-appointed monitor? Because as unfortunate as it is, the COCL and the COEB are through our local elected city officials, who are the defendants in this case, so that's kind of weird. But the judge doesn't have any direct link to us. We don't elect the judge, the federal judge. He gets appointed from Washington, D.C. The DOJ is from Washington, D.C., and we don't have any direct effect on them. So the only people we have local influence on are the city council here in Portland. And so if we can figure out a way to make that work, let's make it work.
Thank you. I do have something I want to mention just briefly. I would like to say that I'm hoping that Judge Simon will give me a chance and to speak and say that I will have an opportunity to go up and I will ask for that. I am hoping that he will let us ask the judge. I'm asking the judge right now if that would be a possibility. So let's take a break. B? Did you one more comment? Go ahead. That's fine.
I wanted to kind of talk about Renault's or Mental Health Portland Mental Health Thank you, Ann. No, I appreciate it. Mental Health Association of Portland. Jason Renault and Jenny Westberg's letter. But if you want, and if the community wants to take a break now and then cover that later, that's fine. Take a break now? Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep that in mind and we'll take a break and we can discuss it more in depth when we come back.
Awesome.
Okay. All right, let's go on break.
I apologize to all of you. I need to leave right now, and I'll watch the rest of it online.
Can you hear me? Or see me, I guess. We're good? Okay.
Can't you read it?
Everything good?
As a neutral city staff person.
And I just want to make sure we have captions tonight. Is that correct? Captions are good? Wonderful. Sweet. Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. It's 6:44 p.m. right now. We're getting back started with this meeting. Before we go ahead, I just want to ask if there's any new people in the crowd. I would like to say your name and maybe how you heard about COAB. So could we start with the gentleman right here?
What?
Oh, I would say, Philip, if I could request instead of, I'm Ann. Just want to request that instead of just pointing out people, please say your name and who you're from and where you're from. Just make it an option if you choose to. We're here to do that, and just make it clear it's an option. Because it sounded like.
And honestly, I will try to do that. I take that back. So I guess I should say, and I didn't. I'm deaf, so I point. That's how I indicate people. So, and he's already standing, and he's good. So, but that's good to know for the future. So yes, the gentleman in the shirt right there. Yes.
My name's Philip Chachka. I heard about COAB from just the news reports a year or two ago. I really appreciate what you're doing. I think it's important. On the draft, I have one comment. I was wondering if we could put the names of the commissioners that are negligent in appointing members. I think it'd be nice to actually say the names of the committee members.
Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you more at future meetings.
Hi, Philip.
We need community support. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? Did anyone else want to introduce themselves? Did we see a hand? Are we good? Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear you, Philip saying. Sorry.
My name is Mr. Barnett. I'm a over 40-year resident of Northeast Portland, and I first heard about the COAB and the COCO and the whole thing from news reports, but also from CopWatch. And I was at the very first town hall meeting that was held out in North Portland at the
Where you been?
Center.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you more.
Mr. Barnett was also active with the Bias-Free Policing Work Group and helped put those recommendations together.
Oh, all right. Good to know. Thanks. I'll make a note of that.
Okay. All right.
Hello, folks. I'm not new to COAB, but it's great to be back. And perhaps
Thanks
a
for
good
coming.
time to be back. I am Reverend Luke Walters, and I represent PAMI, which is Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Mental Illness. We advise Disability Rights of Oregon. And I wanted to add something today because I have this opportunity. This might seem like the best moment to do that because the topic tonight has been very, very, very overwhelming. And this is potentially a change of topic. So I hope it's welcome. The last meeting that I was at 2 weeks ago in the council chambers, somebody pointed out something that was very significant to me. The term repurposing. And I really like that. However, I want to ask some feedback and insight from you because perhaps in the repurposing, which could be very beneficial to the COAB proceedings, to try what's working rather than to discontinue what's not working, how much of this repurposing would take this proceeding out of scope?
Out of scope of what?
Of what COAB exists for.
Well, okay, so
If what we're trying to do is not working, is a repurposing going to, and focus on what is working, going to bring it out of scope?
that's like answering a future. It's difficult to answer because
Yeah.
I can't answer to future conditions.
Exactly. I have some ideas, though. Yeah.
What are they? Please. What are they?
I would just want to say, oh, sorry. Were you
Philip?
done? I just wanted to say, yeah, I think this is a good question, and I think it's something that we need to think on and develop our perspectives. From what I can say right now, from the work I've been doing thus far, is that we have had some successes.
Yes.
But those successes have been taken out of our hands, and they've been really stopped at the level that they've been taken. And so maybe getting away from Cocal, getting away from the city, that pipeline can be opened and we can start making changes and start really getting some things done. And it's really hard to measure until we see the results of after that happens. So I guess, I don't know if that's an answer to the question, but.
Yeah, it's hopeful.
So I was going to say that what hasn't worked, I believe, and from the input that I've received from people in the community, that although we have all of these great ideas and these incredible talents, and we appreciate them, the community appreciates them, either through some not so invisible hand, but definitely through constraining forces from other stakeholders, they're not being accepted or taken seriously. And I think, this letter from Jason Renaud highlights a lot of it from Mental Health Portland Association. Highlights much of it. There are voices that have not been welcomed from the outset. There's been too much political, I don't even know what it's called because I'm not a politician, but this kind of horizontal pushing and enforcing, and now there's just a few of us here. But it doesn't mean that we don't care.
Political dynamics, there's a lot going on.
What's that?
Political dynamics, there's a lot.
Yeah, and it gets in the way of people receiving the care that they need, whether that's people in the PPB, right, at the front end, or the people that are mentally ill, however serious, who live wherever they live, whether they live in a house or if they don't have a house at all, right? And if you look at the data, where most of the use of force events, situations, incidences happen, unsurprisingly, to the people that are mentally ill and are aware of where these numbers are at, it's where the services are offered downtown, right, in the central area. So what's been working? I think there's a lot of really good people that are still at the table, that are still committed, just like all of you who come here, meeting after meeting after meeting, or year after year after year, right? That's continuing working. But I think a lot of that is about community members insisting that that we're part of the conflict. It reminds me of an article by Niels Christie, 1977. Conflict is property. And that's when the state takes away ownership of the conflict between the victim and the offender, and it says, we, the state, we know how to take care of this. We have courts and systems and laws to take care of it. You guys don't worry about it. Victim, we're not so concerned. So that's why the settlement agreement has so much potential, is that it's saying, yeah, we want the victims at the table, or the people that care about the victims at the table.
Thank you, V.
Yeah.
May I speak again?
Of course.
I think it would be
Please.
very refreshing at this time for the people to lead the way. The community. Because all too often, it's the state, it's the government that assumes that they have all the answers. But these events of the last 24 hours show us, or a few weeks show us, that is not the case.
Well, I mean, I think
Not all the time.
you're right,
you know?
but I think the settlement agreement implicitly aspires to bring the community back into the conversation via the COAB, right?
Yes.
But then when you have other actors that are written into that settlement agreement that say, Jason Renault, I'm sorry, you don't speak the way we need you to speak, right? In order to be able to hear what you're saying. Therefore, you're not legitimate, right?
It's like we need translators for that system's language.
Well, I mean, I think you have a point there, right? So you need people who are willing to and capable and have the commitment and desire to be those builders. I'm from Portland, those bridge builders, right?
Liaisons.
Bridge, oh,
yeah.
no bridge crane here.
Weavers. Yeah, connectors.
I used to operate, never mind. What?
So I don't know if anybody has been taking notes about the successes. I've been identifying some and reporting back to DRO. But over the last 6 months, I've been really excited about some of the things that we've talked about. Like, for instance, the community engagement workshop. Some of the subcommittees were accomplishing some great progress, gaining ground. There were some ideas of there's already some of these activities in place where there's people in roles helping facilitate where people are needing information or guidance or safety for, what was it,
You mean BHU?
No, it was more community-based. It wasn't the TriMet, but it was something like that.
Huh.
And it inspired
Public
me
safety?
to look into something like that. It inspired me to look into community policing, so I reached out to Guardian Angels because they've been a successful program in the past. And I don't know how much interest there is from COAB, but last time I was here, I talked to Cody, and he invited me to step up to the mic and talk about the interest in connecting with neighborhood associations so that we can really empower the grassroots. And I know that there's some media coverage of these proceedings, but I think the people really need some support right now. And I think COAB is in a good position to offer that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's out of scope, though.
We can't do it alone. We need each other, and we need to come together.
I don't know when community's ever out of scope, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm Ann, and I just want to say, the city talks about a state of emergency for a certain topic. I think we're in a state of trauma.
Absolutely.
And I would like to encourage the city to think about how to work with trauma. Even in this room tonight, listening to the stories, I personally feel what people are saying. And just thinking about how we as a city can work with each other. I mean, I think this process would be better, easier if we all recognize that trauma and think about outside the box, how can we work together? I mean, it's traumatic to be told that you can't meet or you're on recess. That's a traumatic thing right there.
It's abandonment and neglect.
Yeah, so just to put that out there, I was at one of the subcommittees for mental health for COAB, and they talked about trauma, and it was one of the topics. And I like to bring that word back, that thing that I think about healing. And but I encourage the city and other people to think, what kind of steps can we do to help heal the trauma?
So, if I may, Chair, respond.
Oh, go.
During our last work session, I brought up the point, and this was after, I mean, I'm not like some lone island. Right? People call me, Mila, I've got this great idea. I'm like, okay, what is it? Well, why don't we? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's a really good idea. But what a couple of community members were talking about is, we have these community forums. We all have different degrees of trauma. It's a given human experience. So, why can't we empower some sort of like a trauma response team. What would that be? TRT? No, it would be CTRT, right? Community trauma response team, right? And you can, and it's a possibility, and it's a viable possibility through restorative practices. So I've been talking to some community members and some people on the COAB, and that's something else that we would like to do aside and apart from this as a process, talking about the settlement agreement. But in fact, hey, look at it. As far as I can tell, the city really isn't explicitly interested in saying, we know that people are hurt, let's take care of it. They pay the lawsuit, you're done. But the fact is, people are still reeling from that trauma, whether it's vicarious or secondary trauma or whatever. But there are processes to address that, and there's types of response teams that, like, they use them during major disasters like Haiti. They have them, and they use like narrative therapy. Anyway, it's like one of the things I'm into. So I'm going to be starting light, so we need to connect about that. So you'll be hearing about it in the future.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I talked with V about her idea, and I think it's amazing. Again, and I think this has to take place after we're independent and that we have more control over what we could do. I mean, we could set up a work session or a subcommittee or some kind of mechanism to make that happen. So, and once we get a little breathing room and we're a little more free, we can see that, and I don't see why not. Right now, we're a little bit focused on the report, but I think that is something that we definitely need to be keeping in mind, and I fully support it.
Yeah, I mean, COAB or not, it's happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sure, and just looking into this, who in the city can I contact about asking about this?
Well,
not organized, but just asking.
No, I was thinking about, it's just this has been evolving since July and a little bit before, probably like in April when stuff started happening at COAB, and I was like, wow, there's no process, and COCL isn't envisioning any process, and they're supposed to be taking care of the COAB, but they're not. Right, because it's all about community engagement. So it got me thinking, of course, so I started researching. And where was I going?
Who in the city to contact?
Oh, yeah. So I was thinking of maybe talking, can I do this? To Amanda Fritz. She's an ex-psychiatric nurse. I thought I would just go talk to one of the commissioners. You want to come with me? Sure. Okay. What?
You better get a ticket.
No, is Christina here? No, I don't think so. And actually, Amanda has brought that up before about restorative justice.
Oh, she has?
Yes. So we can talk afterwards.
Okay. Yay. Right on.
Yeah. Dan, did you have something?
No. Not as far as I know. Ted Wachtel, Paul McColl, early 90s. Braithwaite. Yeah, I could go on and on. Sorry.
So I just, something that got said before made me want to reemphasize that until the settlement agreement is modified, which I think everybody wants it to be, the COCL and the COAB are still bound to each other. And paragraph 163 about the semi-annual reports says the DOJ and the city have 30 days to comment, and the COCL has to present publicly to the COAB. So the fact that he said you don't have to be at the meeting, this is like the third or fourth time he said you don't have to be. You have to be. He has to present it to you as a board, and the 25th is after your recess is over. So I just want to make that clear that the COCL should be making that an official meeting. Members of the COAB should be there, and what we wrote through the local office today is, 6.5 hour day, which is what they're planning because it's going to end at 7:30. The town hall for volunteers is a very long stretch. If we're going to be at this judge's courtroom at 1 o'clock, but since he's flying in, from Chicago, it probably has something to do with that. We can't go back in time and change that, I guess, right now. The other thing is that in order to change what the structure of the COAB is going to look like, I don't know how many people in this room were visited, but I've heard that the city has been approaching people one-on-one. They went to the Training Advisory Council. They went to the AMA Coalition. They went to individuals who've been on the COAB. But they never got us in one room all together. And that's how they try to deal with these things. They try to atomize us and split us apart.
Yeah.
When we could come up with a great solution if we'd be put in a room together.
Oh yeah, totally. You'd have the diverse voices in one place.
Right. So I'm saying that partly because I recognize that people from the city are hopefully watching this meeting tonight, and that we need to talk about this together, and let's not just come up with an idea and push it down on the community.
Listen to Dan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can those people who've been organizing this let us know who they've been meeting with? And so maybe we, as a community outside, can meet with each other if that's not going to happen as part of a process. Just an idea.
That's a good idea. I've heard that some people from the PRB were contacted, and like Dan said, when the city attorney's office called me in for an hour meeting or something like that.
So they called in quite a few mental health advocates, and we kind of
did they?
heard, but we don't know who.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
Someone said,
either.
like, "Hey, we saw them walk in, but it would be nice to know who." And
Yeah.
then all of us, wouldn't it be great to get together? You're right, all diverse voices,
Yeah.
and suggest something.
Yeah. So
Go
I
ahead,
wanted
Vee.
just to look at the Mental Health Association, Portland Association. God. Well, first off, just honor the work that they've done over the decades, since the early 90s, really. And more pointedly, the work that they've done with the settlement agreement, and how they were actively, what's the word? Excluded. Well, definitely they weren't included. Clearly, they don't feel it. That they weren't feeling welcomed. So I just wanted to go over their letter just in a couple of points. So on the first page, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, after more than a year, the settlement agreement has not reduced the use of lethal force against people with mental illness and addictions. We know this because our extended record keeping gives us the ability to calculate a per year average of shootings and fatalities. And since the settlement agreement was put in place, the average has not dropped. The police have offered data showing some reduction in force. We believe any claimed progress likely happened not because of the agreement, but in spite of it. There are larger cultural and national forces altering behavior which aren't accounted for. By the time we see it, the data will have been collected by police officers, shuffled by staff, reviewed by the discredited Chicago-based contractor, and ignored by the city. And then again on page 2, paragraph 3, here's what we know. And the bullet points: systems do not fix themselves. The problem does not need to be part of the solution. I wish that was sussed out a little bit more, but I'm a detail hound. Disputes can't be resolved, reforms will never happen, and communities cannot heal when all efforts to do so exclude the persons most affected. Municipalities can't resolve systemic or social problems when they exclude the most affected by the problem's disposition. So if you're not including the victim, you're not really addressing the spine or the root of the problem, right? Exclusion is self-evident to the people who are excluded and usually denied or defended by those already at the table. I'll defend us here and say, not this table. I think we've been pretty committed. As advocates for people with mental illness, we're used to this, but nevertheless, we question these exclusions and ask for appropriate inclusion. I think that's important to have in there. And then 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph. The key message from the breakdown and disintegration of the COAB Advisory Board is that the city doesn't yet have relationships with the recovery community or know how to communicate with us. And I would just add to that I'm not sure that the recovery community was at the table. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't mind being put on the spot that way. Maybe I'm one recovery community. Maybe there's a couple more still here, you know. Certainly we have an advocate. And I think that's a point to look at. We're still here at the table. So if the city is interested in learning how to communicate with our community, we can advise them of agencies and individuals such as Ann Casper, right, who provide training. Now, I do disagree here. Neither the parties, the I can't pronounce that, amici, nor the COCL and the COAB represent persons with mental illness who have been harmed by police use of force. I will never say that I represent anybody. I know that I represent myself. I know that when community members call me and they talk to me or they ask me questions, I do my best to bring up their concerns at the table exactly the way they tell me. And that may sound rude sometimes, but my job isn't to be nice. My job is to help resolve problems. So, on page 3, second paragraph, indeed the COCL team, along with its city-hired staff, systemically excluded persons with mental illness, people the DOJ identified as the chief recipients of harm from police actions. The COCL contractor was selected by the mayor against the recommendation of our organization, its supporters, and pretty much everyone else, and the contractor proceeded to stifle and silence people with mental illness, ignoring our concerns, not providing reasonable and requested accommodations, arranging for one to be arrested, threatening another, generating a hostile atmosphere, and insulating us all in comments published in the daily paper. I'd like to thank the Mental Health Association for making that point. And in the third paragraph, now, we suspect the city and the DOJ will bring a proposal to the status conference to amend the settlement agreement, changing how oversight's done. Either directly or by inference, they will blame people with mental illness for not participating, when actually they tried and got insults and exclusions in return. Their proposal will use words like unsafe or disruptions or unmanageable to describe our behavior. That was kind of like perfectly timed. These words are fear-based exaggerations held true by the powerful, the language of prejudice. We may be called unstable, angry, or mad. That's the one thing they'll get right. We are mad. We're mad as hell because cops killed our friends. In the sixth paragraph, talks about a monitor. But a monitor would represent the interests of the parties and not the persons harmed, not the persons with mental illness. A monitor would further limit the community and voices of people with mental illness, and that's both wrong and short-sighted. It's the voices of those persons, the harmed persons, and their allies that performs these three essential actions, not these. First, their equal participation, regardless of how crazy they sound, gives credibility to the process. He calls this is a reconciliation, not just a checklist or a set of logical rules. There was a harm, trust has been broken, and there must be reconciled and repaired. Second, within these voices is the actual solution to the problem of misuse of force. The solution exists, but it's not within the settlement agreement or any part of the law. It exists to be discerned and discovered and used. And I think we talked about a little bit of that earlier. Third, the discussion of the U.S. DOJ v. City of Portland is the first time people with mental illness have been purposefully included in a public policy conversation by the City of Portland. First time. It's no surprise there's anger and shouting. We've waited a long time. The cocoa contractor and the city-hired staff should have known anger and shouting would happen when they pushed moderate, knowledgeable, and thoughtful voices out of the room. Shouting begins many authentic reconciliation discussions. No. But it is human.
And then actually, we had a comment over here first. Would you mind? Is this in response to what V has said, or is this another? Okay.
This is V.
I have here a message from Ann Brayfield. And after I'm through reading it for the record, I'll leave it with you, Tom. She has some specific recommendations. Ann Brayfield has been working on this for the last 6 years.
And is a member of the Accountability Subcommittee. Yeah.
Good evening. I am Ann Brayfield, concerned citizen and a community member of the COAB's Accountability Subcommittee. Thank you for your considerable work on the COAB's annual status report to Judge Michael Simon. Having read and reread many times your draft status report, I have a suggestion for getting your very important message front and center. Please consider beginning with a short synopsis of the main conclusions you have come to in your status report with emphasis on, and she has 4 points. Number 1, the necessity of the COAB to be independent of the city in order to fulfill its extensive duties under the settlement agreement and to be an effective oversight body. Much of the past year's history that you have laid out in this year's status report backs up your conclusion re-independence from the city. Point 2, compliance issues that must be addressed. Number 3, the considerable work you have put into recommendations. And finally, a fairness hearing, as Judge Simon needs to hear from the community, as it has been almost 3 years since the community has spoken with him, and much has happened that continues to be of concern to the community. And she concludes, please feel free to call on me if I can help in any way as you finish work on the COAB's 2016 status report. Thank you.
Thanks for reading that, Clay.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, go ahead. Ann?
Kudos to Ann.
Yeah, that Ann.
Well
Yes. All Anns.
All Anns. That's awesome.
Thank you very much for
Talk
your
about
comment.
inclusive.
For reading the letter.
V, you were asking why we weren't at the table, we as people with mental health issues. One thing, and I've mentioned this before, I don't think you were at the church, Maranatha, where we had a meeting, is that we as a community of mental health people, however you want to define that, didn't have a legal person, a lawyer with us. So what had happened when the settlement first got into play, the AMA, is that right?
Yeah.
Albina Ministerial Alliance.
Yeah.
They got free legal assistance. So and I believe, this is just what I'm thinking, that's what I've heard. And then also, I believe the union, police union is part of this also official.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
They also have legal representation. So the city has legal representation. We didn't know that we had to have a lawyer to be one of the parties to have the official voice. So we just didn't know, or maybe people knew that, but those of us in the community, I didn't know that, and I would have helped to do that, but we didn't do that step. That's what happened.
Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, you know,
Comment
just
back there?
FYI, you know, I thought the AMA, you know, or the mental health community was sort of subsumed under the AMA.
Okay, let me read from Jason's letter.
But Jason makes it clear. But please, please, please,
Yes,
please.
you may have the impression that the AMA coalition represents the interest of people with mental illness. I don't know, you can speak more to this. No, okay, well, according to Jason, not so. our organization is a member of the group, not part of the vestry, the executive council, or privy. I have visited the AMA, and it's been great talking to them. Not quite sure if it's their job or to represent us, people with mental health issues. I don't know if that's their interest or their job to do so.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's good to hear.
Okay, and then Katie.
Oh, yeah, and to piggyback on that, well, as Tom
Thank
has
you,
said from the beginning, one of the things that really does seem clear now is needed is definitely to find like legal counsel. I mean, I know I think the AMA actually gets pro bono lawyers through the National Lawyers Guild, and there's also disability rights in other groups, so I don't know, there may be ways to do that without the city having to pay for it, and it might actually be better if they're not doing a request for proposals and deciding who they're gonna hire and pay, but yeah, I think that is true, just because even like legal things like people were asking about yesterday, like this and that in public meetings, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it would just help so much to have a lawyer who could answer a lot of that and know, because there's just so many like little wonky details in this that, I think you're right though. That does, I don't know what the AMA's relationship is to us, but I
mean, what? Well, I mean, I'm from Portland, right? So, we know the history of Portland, the PPB, and the Black/African American community. And I'm not going to say that those problems, racism doesn't exist, right? I think the racial profiling data from the Gang Enforcement Task Force shows that. It demonstrates that. Right, in terms of EBT, evidence-based practices, I mean, it's there. But under the purview of the settlement agreement, the laws don't exist for it to be explicit, right? So, but the fact of the matter is, at the same time, the people that received use of force excess, I'm getting kind of tired, were those that were that had or perceived to have a mental illness to whatever degree, right? But I just want to be clear that it's not as though, I want to be clear that those problems exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so V, maybe I can help you clarify. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I think what you're trying to say is yes, mental health, people in the mental health community are targeted by police officers, and there is a big intersectionality with racism. So,
well, yeah,
they overlap.
Just what you were saying.
And is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah,
There's overlap.
Linda was talking during break about this fellow. I forgot his first name, but isn't his last name Bettis? It's easy for me to remember that because but the way wasn't he the one that was mule kicked that you saw? No, yeah, we're not here to do that,
Right. And so I think that was the point she was trying to make, right, V? That their mental health and, there's plenty of other issues that are part of a bigger problem. It's just they overlap. And I agree with you. We don't have enough support or focus on that as well. And it is something we need to bring to the forefront.
And I just want to say, too, as a Portlander, it's been so good to have these discussions. And I want to make clear, I do think AMA should be at the table.
Yeah.
But I also think that another focus group who is legally represented should also be at the table. And as we were talking before, have us work as community together.
Yeah, together.
And to be there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'd also like to bring up the marginalized community of the houseless individuals, how they're
a lot of intersections.
It's so overlapping that it's a vicious cycle from jail to courts to
commitment courts to hospitals.
Yeah, and it's just like sometimes sleep deprivation looks kind of crazy, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it is.
It doesn't mean that. You're not a functioning person, but you're so marginalized that why function?
Well, the sheaths of, myelination occurs when you sleep. So if you don't have enough sleep, then the sheaths don't, in your neurons, they don't heal. So their brain doesn't function as well. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and some people just are mentally ill and have a hard time sleeping, right?
So Ann, with the settlement agreement, it's going to get looked at again because the COAB and the COCO are going to get separated, and that takes the judge's order. So something's going to happen with the settlement agreement. And as you talk, the AMAC got the AMAC, the coalition. They got this amicus status by convincing the judge, that they were proper. They had an interest. I don't know all the legal standard, but basically they were a proper party to represent the interest of people concerned about reform and related to the settlement agreement, something like that. And the point you're making about being, and we've had COAB members I know that have really hammered on this. This should be about people with lived experience, because that's what the settlement agreement is supposed to be about, and yet you're not represented. So this might be the time. I mean, there's a new window here. So I'm not sure if I can help you. I mean, not as a lawyer, but because I'm not a lawyer anymore. But we can either talk, or you on your own may want to really pursue it, because either an organization or a coalition of advocacy groups or something could seek that status and get yourself into the mix better. It may not be a good idea, but I mean, it's an idea.
Mm-hmm. It's a great idea. Thanks for saying that, Tom.
And maybe AMA would
Good.
help us.
They're good at it because they succeeded.
Yes. Okay, there's a comment over here.
One of the really important things going on all across the United States is the discovery that communities do not trust their police officers. So built into our settlement agreement, the COAB was supposed to help facilitate the building of trust. What we just saw in recent weeks is that the city has destroyed more trust at a rate faster than they can build it. The police, ditto. The US DOJ, ditto. There are a lot of people questioning the AMA coalition, as some of these questions are coming up now. So it would seem to me that if we want to have a trust-building operation here, I'd like to know where and when that is going to begin, and who's going to be the leader of it, and who's going to be responsible for it, and who's going to have the authority to see that it happens. Otherwise, trust is a useless word.
Well, trust.
Yeah,
trust
thank you.
is
Thank you for sharing. And
it's-
and I just want to say one question. I want to ask, what do you mean by authority? Who, you said, I guess who has the authority, and who has the authority to give the authority? Do you mind talking about that?
I thought that when Kathleen Sadat was appointed as the local COCO, I thought she was really and truly going to facilitate the community, not show favoritism to the police or to side with the COCO when it felt insulted or humiliated by the COAB. I really thought that strong leadership, not only from Kathleen, but also from Amanda Fritz, from the mayor.
You see, but here's this goes back to the conversation then. Well, who does the conflict really belong to? We can't, in my view, you can't expect the state to resolve the community conflict. So it resides within the community. And unfortunately, the police, for some reason, think that they're outside of that community and they can act, right, because they fall under the purview of, well, we're illegal. We fall under this guise of of integrity and credibility through legal means. But in the community, I don't gain my credibility by my sense of legality. I gain it by my sense of integrity and charisma. Just kidding. but you know what I mean? I mean, it's about, well, you know, can you depend on her? Does she give you what you want when you want it? You know, does she produce what you want? Does she bring value to whatever process that you're doing? So I think it's in the community. Now, authority. Where is the community? Well, I think what we're seeing right here, right now. You just got kicked out. Okay, I got kicked out by the city, right? Yes. Okay, so the city is saying, we're not going to include the COAB. We're not going, trust does not say, because we're going to rule this however we're going to rule it. Yeah, right?
Yeah, and I hear you. And I think one thing that we as a community should focus on is, what does police accountability mean? If we figure that out, how to make them accountable, and that's successful, the community, I think, will feel more trust. But there's no accountability at this point. The city doesn't support police accountability, clearly.
Right.
And so that is what we need to come together to talk about police accountability, how to increase that.
I mean, I don't think we can make anybody be accountable. I think accountability only comes after trust is built. And that takes time. It's a transactional thing. It's a transaction that occurs. It's a relational event that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong. I think you're right, and I completely understand what you're saying. And you can't force it. But I would like to give you an example. Like yesterday, I saw an officer in City Hall with his hands on his weapons, ready to draw, and I completely disagreed. That was not trust building. That was not community engagement. That was a message that I'm ready to draw, I'm ready to engage, and I completely disagreed. I thought that their hands should be on their vests, you know, in plain sight, but I actually snapped a picture, and I told the officer that's not okay. I gestured at him, but that's police accountability. I didn't force him, but I had to figure out how to tell him, and that's just one example.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's just obviously a very, very small piece, but I think it's representative of a larger concept.
Sure,
how
totally.
we can address it, how we can really come at it. The community has power, and the power is in the law, and the powers that be, and we need to bring it down to the core, to the community. But, and it's how we use it. It's how we use that power.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know we only have a few more moments, but I wanted to let you know I am
go
in a
ahead.
very good position to help out here. There's been some topics that I believe relate to my areas, not only Disability Rights of Oregon, who is, you know, a resource of attorneys, but also there are a number of coalitions forming in the peer community, the consumer, survivor, ex-patient, mental health and addictions community currently. There's new ones and there's old ones reforming that I am very strongly connected with, but I want to be very clear on what the message is of what I can relay to them. Are there multiple messages? Do I relay one message to Disability Rights of Oregon and others to the peer community coalitions?
What message are you referring to exactly? I'm sorry, what's your name?
Reverend Luke Walters.
Reverend Luke Walters. I'll probably forget that. I'm sorry.
You can call me Luke Skywalker if you like.
Okay, cool. That's much easier. I'm going to make this real, for me, right? I think it's time to come together and to have community discussions in a circle process, facilitated by people who've recovered or recovering or in the process of, and to start building relationships and go from there. Because I think as you start to build those relationships, then the opportunities, they just, right? It's just a matter of factors of multiplication or.
The people lead the way.
Yeah, I mean, but it's embedded in a system.
Yes.
Always embedded in a system.
I really like your idea, Anne, that a team or a core of trauma
you can take it, I don't care.
Specialists
Both of you guys.
be available.
Teamwork.
When I said earlier community policing, I really wanted to retract that and rephrase that to be like more like nurses, the trauma specialists available.
CCT.
That is
Community
just
care
awesome.
team.
And perhaps the COAB can help in, designing that and implementing that. I don't know.
I can help, but I don't have to do it as part of COAB.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah. Oregon Institute of Restorative Practices.
Yes.
So.
Okay, all right, so it is time. Our time is up, but I really
Wait,
want
can
to
we have a
have this
co-eb party?
kind of relationship. Yeah?
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, yeah.
Just look for us on Facebook.
Just in case this is going to be the last meeting, and this is fun. Maybe we should have a party and have people like, hey, come support us. It's not a bad idea, V. No, anyway, but as I was saying, thank you for giving me the opportunity to run the meeting. This has been a great experience, and if we would want to continue, then we could, but I think everybody's ready, so I think we'll go ahead and close. I want to keep the lines of communication open. Tom is still working on the draft, and we want to support Tom, and we applaud his work. He has had a major role in this report, and we want to recognize that, so thank you. Thank you, Tom. Round of applause for Tom. And yes, I do want to take advantage of this moment and mention Ted Wheeler. Hello. I want to sit down for a coffee date and talk about the future and how we can support the future goals and needs. And I haven't gotten a response. So if you would like to meet for a coffee date, that would be wonderful.
Oh, goodness sakes.
Okay. All right. Meeting adjourned.
That's hilarious. I thought he was in the room.